That was beautiful. Thank you, everybody, for being here. That's a great start to the Jackson Wheeler series, isn't it? Full room. Great audience too, I can tell. So I'm going to read. I decided this is the teacher in me. I know it's like I retired, but I'm doing lesson plans. And when I do readings, it's like I'm going to focus on poems about art because of where I am. Just art process and art and different paintings, and it always makes me feel satisfied. Like when you do a lesson plan and it's all perfect, though it never happens that way anyway. But it's like anyway. I'm going to start though with this. Maya, who is a California poet, did this. Was a very good friend of Jackson Wheeler's, and he sent her many postcards over, the years. And she had this beautiful book published about responding to these postcards and messages from Jackson. And I think it's so beautiful, and it makes him present. So I'm going to read a poem from this. This came out just not too long ago from, what is it, Chola Press? Choya, yeah. It's called, the poem is called The Bargain. It's from, and there's a postcard here. It's hard to see because they're small, but it's just somebody sleeping and all these dream animals surrounding her. It's a woman. And then the poem ends with this little writing by Jackson. You'll recognize his part at the end. The Bargain. The artist is Laura Marshall. Like every singer, in exchange for the treasure, you welcome all comers. In your hands a salmon thrashes, nightmare birds cling to your hair, you're clamped in the teeth of the lioness, who has always loved your body. They assail your sleep, each with a claim on you as you lie helpless, unable to move or speak. Until you are born from the dark into sound and somebody holds you and lets you sing. Splendid, splendid. I drove back home, all night birdsong, as although the very air was vibrating with your music. Yeah, you can tell Jackson's voice there. Yeah. So, and you can get that on Amazon. It's called Postcards from Jackson. Okay. So I'm going to start with reading the poem that's the title poem of my last book, Cipher Garden, because it's about art. And I'd also start with a quote that I've been thinking of lately and kind of writing around. It's by Edwidge Dandicott. Though sometimes as we walk this earth with the memories our loved ones shadowing us, we might also become our own holy places, roaming churches, cathedrals, and memory mausoleums. So this poem is kind of like that. It takes place it was inspired by a cathedral, St. Olaf Cathedral in Trondheim, in which there was a cipher garden, which was a carving on the floor of the cathedral. And in each square, there was, it's from medieval times, an animal that stood for one of the sins, the terrible sins. And then there were, blank spaces where you were supposed to put your own sins and stamp on them. So that's what inspired this. Obviously, any poet would look at that and say, oh, I have to write about that, right? So, okay. There's also a part in here, referring to Chagall, one Chagall's paintings too. On the flagstone floor, a carved garden dedicated to the deadly sins. Each sin signed by an animal, an inverse sky of bestial constellations. Gluttonous fat pig, low to the ground. razor-clawed crab secreting anger, sweet sloth loving total laziness. Empty squares demand sinners lay down each transgression stamped upon. Whoever made animals emblems of sin? I tried, but I couldn't think of deeds in my long life I would quash. My commitment to appetite, creme brulee, Provencal wine, a bouillabaisse of taste and smell, finding sun my home of slow dreams. Butterflies connect the patchwork of my anger, soaring into the spheres, pigments from the warm body of the earth. The animals in my cipher garden fly in Chagall's vision at the center of all things, red whirling in a womb of yellow, dancing bull and cow, flying fish, firebird, Adam and Eve laughing as they are expelled by a tender angel, flying out of and into hope. I was 26 when I left the convent, not knowing how my clumsy body could rise then fall like a feeding pelican, guttural moaning in blue-backed, red-rimmed ecstasy. Was it a sin, I asked a priest? I don't know, he said. Too many years before I flew into my body. I would stamp on that sorrow. Its cipher was a blank slate. What came after floods the margins, emblems in lapis and carnelian, colors in the language of cardinals. Think of that statue of the black bear nosing a berry bush at the entrance to Madrid's Puerto del Sol. I was that berry appetite and the sweet fruited bush. I was so hungry. Yeah, thanks. So that book is about, different symbols and how things mean other things. So let's see, I just put my list away. So this poem is called With Wheat, With Crows, and it starts with Wheat Filled with Crows by Vincent van Gogh. And it's about memory and how you go to a place and all of a sudden all these memories come back. So part of it's set in the Midwest, in St. Paul. That's where I'm from, St. Paul. If you're wondering about my accent, if you don't know me. With wheat, with crows. Vincent paints all day in the wheat fields, dipping into his heart's colors. Snap pea, moss, celadon, piling on brushstrokes, wave after wave. Every day he goes deeper into that world, in ecstasy, in terror. For me, love is the true color, he writes his brother, the true matter of art. Tonight along the Mississippi, full moon on the river, green lace softening the gap between branches, I walk past the seminary, cross the small bridge. Below me, the ravine leads to the grotto where I knelt in the dirt as a child, before a wide-armed Mary hewn from granite, imagining I was Bernadette in the mud of Lourdes. And I remember how Jean and I, two young nuns, crossed the river in spring to visit my great-uncle Jack in the ward for vets. Rows of bedridden men without limbs who cried because we stopped there. These spring evenings, one crow perching in an oak on the river bluff summons others from their trees of learning, calling them to roost. Near the end, Vincent paints that furl of crows clawing the sky over wheat. For we who live on bread, he writes, are we not ourselves wheat? Our bright bodies a harvest, the only home the heart has found? Here's another Vincent poem. Letter to Vincent. I did a Vincent summer one time trip. This is set in Provence. And it starts with another quote, one may make a poem simply by arranging colors. In Provence, we live, he wrote that to his sister. In Provence, we live on color. In whitewashed rooms, gold-flecked air enters us like pollen. I trudge up steep hills for bread and creamy cheese, my tongue a stone, until I bite and my mouth fills with new colors, citron, champagne. The meadow, a vast temple open to the sky. A Romanesque church crowns each hill village, cool in the heat, wine in a cask, vermilion tile red, black cat sleeping on top. Between heavy vineyards, over white mountains, light on ochre walls, on red sand, on violet rock, June's eyes open. Red-orange clay on soft yellow stones, walls, cottages, barns. In Roussillon, every russet building burns against solid azure. Swallows swoop and trill against ruby cherries and green nests. We ask, who dreamed lavender fields? Who first planted them? Who saw early evening after a day of blues? In the last of the mist, languidly rising from lavender, Vincent speaks to us. This is a new poem which had been working on. It's called Meditation on Blue, and it's just about blue in lots of ways. But then I just, driving home just a few days ago, I hear on the radio, I don't know if the rest of you are on public radio, about how these forensic archaeologists discovered this bright blue in the teeth of an 11th century nun in Germany, which just blew my mind, because you always think, I always knew there would be women who would be doing those illuminations, but they never had any proof. It was always the monks doing it. And they think it was her, licking the brush with the lapis lazuli that was in her teeth. Isn't that just totally amazing? So I immediately went and put that into this poem, but I'm writing a whole poem about that eventually. I just didn't have time. So this one has got also Fra Angelico's Annunciation, which is at the Prado in Madrid. Meditation on Blue. The blue eye charms in every Turkish market to ward off evil. The same periwinkle adorning shutters and doors in southern France and every hill village in Portugal. The same blue squeezed from woad, a common dye factories made from leaves of the yellow flowering plant. It cut the growth of mold. Woad blue the Picts used to paint their bodies, like the blue nude by Matisse and the bodies of Cézanne's bathers, blue-blotched the way the sky is cloud-blotched. Lapis lazuli, original blue mined from earth in Afghanistan, ground to aquamarine of illuminations, just found in the teeth of a medieval nun, a scribe, used in those centuries of annunciations. Fra Angelico's blue of Mary's gown, sky flowing, the angel all tenderness, longing reigns over his ambiguous face, her whole body a question, all tilt, eyes frightened, forgotten book dropped in her lap. Once a blue fog rose on the lake, revealing a fishing boat. I heard the whine of its motor before I saw my children wave their small arms, turning wings loved by azure wind, bringing them home to me. Earth gave us blue, and we made it the color of heaven, cobalt at the center of things. In my mind, the hands and arms that hold me wear the pregnant blue of the sea before sunset. For a moment, sky and earth, the same aquamarine. We are blue smoke, mineral, then ether, temporary against eternal hills. Blue-veined sky breathing birds in and out of the light, their breasts glowing sapphires where the sun is. At closing time, when the guard comes into the empty Prado, I'm still leaning into that blue of the Virgin, into that deepening sky. So, in honor of that woman, I'm going to read a poem about a woman from even further, longer ago, 19 centuries ago, 19 millennia ago, not centuries, Lascaux. And so I imagined a woman painting the ponies, but then now I think it could, after hearing that about the medieval nun, I think, yeah, a woman probably was in there. Lascaux, 19 millennia ago. Behind the great hall of the bulls, hidden in a small recess, a woman used moss-colored ochre, sticks of charcoal to make a herd of spotted horses gallop across a cave wall. Working in a flicker of light, the artist traced a curve with a shaved chalk twig, filled in with a paste of charcoal and two kinds of hard, dark earth. She ground red ochre to a fine powder with mortar and pestle, picked up a hollow bone, then blew, her mouth filled with a bitter taste. Using her hands so thick lines of color could meet without blurring, horses dappled by stenciled dots and fingertips dipped in paint. Always in motion, these ponies thunder across the rock face, fresh as if just drawn. I think I hear them snort and gnaw, feel their grassy breath, or someone blowing pigment in the dark. Was the painter surprised by what emerged? Would she be amazed to know they are still here, cantering in the dark, in the dawn? I'm going to read another poem. It's about looking closely at one of Van Gogh's sunflower paintings, really closely to see what came to mind. But I just had a review in December written about this book, and the reviewer talked about this poem. I love that. I love that when you read a review and it's like, oh yeah, I didn't know that. It's like that you learn all this, how to talk about your work. Because I think poets have a hard time putting their work into words, describing it. So anyway, what she said was, the flower reflects the intense personality of the painter, becoming dangerous, a weapon. The message in the flower is the message of poetry, that nothing is simple and that the world is layered with meanings we dimly perceive, if at all. Because she'd been talking about sort of how seeing beauty and then looking closely and seeing the hard part of beauty. So Sunflower, Van Gogh, 1888. Only a close-up of a sunflower turns to scales of trout or salmon, ancient patinas or flints of gems, smell of honey, rough amber that rises from strangling vines. What were you longing for when you made them? Tawny flowers, summer wheat, autumn grapes? I am guided by color, you said, by light. Only they can undo or save me. Bright yellow burns from inside out as the sky turns turquoise. This sunflower stabs me with a living eye, makes me see how everything means something else, is something else. So I want to read about temporary art because I'm reading all these things about art, and it's like temporary art, like kids do, Sylvie, my granddaughter here, is a wonderful artist, and she just makes things and makes them and how they do it, just for the pure pleasure of art, and then it's gone. And so this poem I wrote about a temporary art that really impressed me in, like the Buddhists often do, with the sand paintings, but these are like that. There's in Guatemala, in in Easter week. The whole town, this is set in La Antigua, the whole town, all the families and merchants and everybody create these carpets for the streets out of, like sand and flowers and fruit. And I mean, they're the most gorgeous pieces of art you can imagine. The colors are just, the sand is all dyed bright, different colors, and the designs are so beautiful. And then they work all night at them. And in the morning, it's like you're in this magical world. And then, there's a procession, because it's in Holy Week, right? And so later in the day, the procession comes through, and they're carrying the statue of Jesus, and then they just walk all over. The men walk all over the carpets, and they're just destroyed. And then they have to sweep them up, and it's all over, for another year. I mean, it's just totally amazing to me. I mean, you'd want to keep them. Of course, and all the visitors are sitting there taking pictures, trying to keep it, 100 sand and flower carpets, Guatemala. They began last night and are working still at noon, even the little ones who spray dyed vermilion and orange sand grains to keep them from blowing away. Their mother in jeans and sweatshirt stretches to set the topaz eyes in the quetzal birds and the shadows on Mary's roses. Mary with long hair, real as theirs or mine, aquamarine stones for her eyes, holds the child at the center of the universe, butterflies gracing each pole. The young woman with earphones and her cousin with a cell phone lay down serpentine borders of purple hibiscus. They keep me awake all night, but the beauty at my feet pushes faithlessness away. Soon clouds of incense dark the narrow street. Bare feet of men carrying a statue of Jesus destroy the carpet, while drums mourn and the children sweep up brilliant fragments. What happens to beauty when no one believes anymore? Okay. So I'm going to have just 3 more poems. I'll do a 3-poem warning, too. And this is, well, I should say 4, but one of them is very short. This is called Draped Nude. It's a painting by Henry Matisse. 1936, Draped Nude. Fleshy thighs, round belly, ample curves. Bottom heavy as a ripe pear. I like to think this model had a cafe creme this morning. Broke her croissant into small pieces, dappled it with sunny apricot jam, taking pleasure in the moment. So when Matisse posed her languid in the orange chair, lavender silk robe open, brushing her shoulders, there she was, softly pink and radiant. And here we are in our imperfect flesh, dimpled arms, parts that jiggle, victims of the great softening. It's not funny. So let's open our heavy robes, wear silk again. Let the world see the pudding bowls our bellies have become. These hips have carried babies. These thighs have walked many miles. So let's leap up, go to the open window, raise our arms and tip our breasts to the flowing light. This is what we have left. Let's love our exquisite bodies for what they are, the houses that we and time have made. Yeah. Yeah. Don't you just, I just love looking at those paintings with the models are so, I say, oh, wow, she looks like me. So, all right. This poem, I'm reading a poem set in Paris when we went there with our kids when they were little. So it's in first summer we traded houses with teachers, and they lived in our house in Minnesota, and we lived in their apartment. And anyway, this just describes some of it. There's a lot of art in it. The unicorn tapestries at Cluny, which are my favorite favorite piece of art that there is. Plus some others. Remembering Paris, tapestries. When you remember me, speak of that French summer. Talk of Andrew, Carlos, and Bernardino in the stone courtyard, speaking the language of bowls. I'm good at telling them what I mean, my son says, his bright eyes dancing, showing how he hits an imaginary ball. They like to play war like us, but they don't call it war. All afternoon, the thump of rubber on stone. Outside the heavy courtyard door, traffic roars. Paris for Andrew is two Spanish boys who throw balls between the iron railings of his balcony, balls which he must return. When you talk of me, remember Timothy at Cluny, his mind suddenly able to roam across centuries. He stops in front of every portrait asking, was he good or was he bad? Good question. We pore over illuminated manuscripts where icons gleam, a world passing into a world to come. He traces over a crown of gold clasped by two snakes, a curving arm filled with demons and winged lions. In a book of hours, we study symbols of the zodiac. In my birth month, April, a peasant carries a green branch to water. I know I will carry a green branch for Timothy, a memory sitting on marble steps in a hall hung with unicorn tapestries, naming flowers, fruit, herbs, kings, queens, wars, names and eras rising from the salty pages of our tongues. At the Invalides, a military funeral for French soldiers, black-garbed women cry across the courtyard. My sons spend all afternoon studying ancient weapons, the jeweled carvings on swords and battle axes. They're works of art, Timothy proclaims. Nowadays, weapons aren't works of art, are they? At the Grand Palace, crowds worship a painting by Manet. A young man turns his back on his parents, rejects the breakfast that his mother made. On a chair beside him, an ancient sword and helmet, but the enormous eyes in his marble face look far beyond the room, past gazing art lovers, fixed on the clarity of his own death. I know I'll come back to Paris someday, my son says, if war doesn't come too soon. So this is, tomorrow's the big supermoon, blood moon, supermoon, and then an eclipse all at once. So this poem I wrote after the last supermoon. It's in this book. It's very short. It's called In the Same Sky. It's for the supermoon. When that illuminator supermoon pours silver over phosphorescent surf, when darkness turns to flare path or crest waves inside us, when you lie with all your length and warmth and weight over me, the world is big enough to contain us, small enough that now and then, for the space of a night, like Orion, we can walk the length and breadth of hemisphere and be home again in time to cook breakfast in the morning. Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to end with this poem. It's a different kind of art. It's one I see all the time in Ventura. It's a real art, believe me. This is called Surfer's Point, Ventura. Beach seagrass bends, sea-misted wind. In pewter waves in her wetsuit, sleek as a seal, cutting in and out of curls, shining in what light there is. I'm past 70, athletic as a chair, limping on my ruined knee. This is the moment where I yearn for another life, one where I'm lithe, long-limbed, tanned, California bronze, short tousled hair full of sunshine. I shoulder my board, strive into waves, dive under breakers, rise like a heron from earth to air. I'm still waiting for that perfect wave. Let me catch it, arms like wings slicing back and forth in the froth, wind at my back, sun glancing from sea's slick, polished metal. In a northern lake, I watched a bald eagle struggle to swim shoreward, its wing too wet to fly. White head above water, curved neck straining. I first thought it was a surfer in a wetsuit. Creature not made to move in water, all feathers touching bone. Balance is everything. Between water and air, between in and out again, staying ahead of the break, writing my name on water, writing my name on air, writing with feathers, writing on bone. That's it. Thank you. Thanks. You're a great audience.